As much as I would like to see the New York Rangers actually be able to make playoffs at this point with the way they have been playing as of late, it definitely does not seem like a likely scenario that they're actually going to be able to get the job done and make playoffs. So we're going to kind of take a look at a few really important and kind of big decisions that this New York Rangers team is going to have to make in this upcoming offseason, especially if they don't make playoffs. Because, if they do make playoffs and somehow kind of turn things around here, go on an absolute, big winning streak here throughout the rest of this season, then, maybe things change a little bit, but still, they're not going to change a whole lot there. The offseason kind of plan, I think, stays the exact same pretty much, whether this team makes playoffs and wins a round or two, or if they're a first-round exit, or even just don't make playoffs in general here. I think it's pretty obvious that this team, no matter what happens, needs to make some major changes, and we're going to kind of take a look at some of those potential kind of major decisions and changes we could see with this team in this upcoming offseason. So let's get right into it here and start off by taking a look at something that is very important and kind of affects, possible kind of trades that could happen in this upcoming offseason and into next season, as well as the Rangers obviously gave up one of their first round picks over the next two drafts here in the 2025 or 2026 draft. That first round pick went in the JT Miller trade, where the Rangers got back JT Miller, Jackson Dorrington, a prospect, Eric Branstrom was no longer with the team, got dealt away for Obey Kubel, but this team, obviously, having given up that first-round pick and it being top 13 protected, Vancouver did end up flipping that first-round pick over to Pittsburgh for Drew O'Connor and Marcus Pettersson, a defenseman. So they flipped that pick right away. So now Pittsburgh does have the control of the New York Rangers pick in 2025 or 2026, that first-rounder. And with it being top 13 protected, the Rangers have the choice that if it does fall, let's say within pick, 10, 11, 12, 13, the Rangers still do have the option of possibly just saying, okay, Pittsburgh, you get our pick this year and we'll keep our pick next year, because if the Rangers don't and they end up finishing, let's say, with the 14th or 15th pick, just outside of the top 13, or let's say it is just in that top 13 there, it would obviously go over to the Pittsburgh Penguins if the Rangers do decide to keep their pick this year, or it just falls outside of the top 13. So the Rangers potentially giving up an unprotected first-round pick into the 2026 draft, which is expected to be absolutely loaded. You have the number one pick by 115 miles there, or 115 kilometers. Obviously, being Gavin McKenna there, he is just so far and beyond the best prospect in that draft, so far and beyond the best prospect that we have seen, since you could say truly like Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby. He is above guys like Bedard there, obviously, of the Blackhawks. So obviously, there is an absolutely loaded draft in 2026, and I'm not saying I expect this Rangers team to be this bad where they're actually potentially going for that first round pick, but first overall pick. But if, let's say, the Rangers, do have a couple bad injuries, or the things are really not going that well, they end up in the lottery there is the chance where they end up giving up, a high-tier draft pick in a absolutely loaded class as well. And you also have to consider that maybe in this draft class, pick 11, 12, 13, that prospect, maybe let's say the Rangers could get there, maybe isn't as valuable as even, prospect 18, 19, or 20 in next year's draft. That is also a possibility. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there, but I definitely think the decision on that top 13 protected first-round pick is definitely going to be a pretty big decision to make. But taking a look here at two players who I think really need to be traded away by the New York Rangers, and that is Chris Kreider and K'Andre Miller. I think both of these players, this team could benefit from a ton, honestly, from trading these guys away here. Getting back whatever you can, I think, is the right move for this team. Breaking it down first off cap-wise, I mean, right now you take a look at that, Chris Kreider contract there, him making $6.25 million. If you're able to get off that contract there and not have to retain any money at all, that opens up a lot of cap space available for you to go out there and make, something happen there. Obviously, $6.25 million with the cap skyrocketing up, it's a decent chunk of change there, because you take into account, obviously, you're getting rid of that Kreider contract. Maybe you get rid of K'Andre Miller as well, so you're saving, about $6.5 million possibly. He could potentially kind of get something around there, number-wise, on his next kind of extension. So I think you get rid of both these players here, you're saving at least around $12 million in potential cap space there, which I think you can definitely do a pretty good job of kind of replacing these guys with that money. Chris Kreider can definitely be replaced by a guy like, Brendan Hoffman or Brett Berard, maybe even a younger prospect as well coming up through the system. So I don't think kind of what Kreider has brought to this team this season is necessarily going to be a major loss. Let's say I definitely think the Rangers have some young guys here who can kind of really help kind of take that spot of Kreider there, because normally he is in that top 9. So I think having a guy like Berard or Othman in his kind of spot for next season is definitely more than fine. So I think first off, losing Kreider isn't going to be that big of a loss, especially with kind of how he's played as of late. Then you take a look at K'Andre Miller, and yes, he flashes those moments of being great, but for the most part there, he's just not consistent enough, and I think that's kind of why he has to be dealt away. I think he'd still have some pretty good value there. I definitely don't want to see an extension happen where he's making, anywhere close to 6.5 mil, which I kind of think is possible. So in my opinion, you trade him away. The Rangers have already given an extension to guys like Will Borgen, Urho Vakanainen. They brought in Carson Soucy, who still has one more year after this one under contract. So I would say the Rangers have a pretty solid kind of foundation, you could say, on the back end there. It's not a great foundation, but it's not a bad one to kind of help build around. You've got that number one guy in Foxy there. You've still got pieces like a Carson Soucy, an Urho Vakanainen, a Will Borgen, a Braden Schneider, all locked up for next season there, who I think all can definitely play a decent role for this team. Yes, could this team absolutely benefit from adding in another kind of true, top pairing kind of guy or top 4 caliber defenseman, like a high-end top 4 kind of guy? I absolutely think that's a must for this team if they want to be a true cup contender. We can't have, Adam Fox up there being the number one guy, and that's great and all, that works fine, but the next best guy be, like a Braden Schneider wasn't taking that kind of full step in his development yet, or a Will Borgen. So, that's kind of where the massive drop-off is and kind of why I think this team desperately needs to make that upgrade, and K'Andre Miller is just not good enough. And at moments, he may be good enough, but he's not doing it consistently enough to where I think he deserves a nice new contract with this team and to stay on this team long term. I think if the team wants to kind of really compete for a cup there, getting rid of contracts like Chris Kreider's and what K'Andre Miller could possibly make on his next deal definitely would make a lot of sense there. I think they could fetch back some decent value, and you're probably not having to retain any money on Kreider, honestly. I don't think so. So if you can get off those contracts for nothing there, you can get back some decent value back. I definitely think that would make a lot of sense for this team. And now for another decision here that I think is going to be made, and that is probably firing head coach Peter Laviolette. Now, I've been a pretty big advocate of it. I don't think Laviolette is kind of the main person to blame for all this kind of problems and issues that this team has kind of had this season, but he's definitely 110% a part of it, and I just think he is one of those people who, you can kind of fire, and maybe it does help kind of turn things around. He's obviously not been, I would say, like the main problem, but if you do fire a head coach there, you get a new coaching staff, and a guy like Phil Housley on the back end there, he has been like kind of defense coach there for this team. He's obviously done a pretty terrible job, so I think he's definitely someone who has to go. I think Michael Pekka has done some decent things for this team, especially on the face-off side of things there. So there have been some positives with this coaching staff, but especially with how the kind of, power play's been, and just in general, the terrible defensive play, the lack of offense quite a bit at moments as well, and the kind of, just being up in games and then constantly kind of, losing these leads. I definitely think we need a change in the coaching staff. So firing Laviolette and his kind of guys there definitely would make a lot of sense there, in my opinion. So going out there, getting a new coach is probably what's best for this team, whether or not he's kind of the main person to blame. I wouldn't necessarily say so, but he's absolutely a decent size to blame there, you could say. And obviously, firing a head coach there, it definitely could help turn things around. So I definitely think that is the decision that needs to be made in this upcoming offseason. Anyways, that's going to do it for today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on today's video and what are your thoughts on the Rangers in general. And also, kind of what are your thoughts on the decisions here? Do you want to see the Rangers kind of keep that? Even if it is, top 13 pick there, do you want to see him give it away? Do you want to see Kreider traded away? Do you want to see K'Andre traded away? Let me know your thoughts on that. And also, do you want to see Peter Laviolette, the Rangers head coach, and his kind of staff fired as well? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.